Hi, and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 383, and today's date is June 5th, 2014, and the title of this episode is Russia and North Korea to launch ruble transactions, which will bypass the euro and the U.S. dollar. And we understand that North Korea has sanctions upon them from the United States, but it really doesn't matter because they are making deals completely bypassing the euro and the U.S. dollar at this time. And we see China and Russia doing this with many different nations. They are no longer looking to use the U.S. dollar. They are completely setting up their system to completely bypass the euro or the U.S. dollar at this time. And we see that NATO and the United States are continually encircling Russia. They are bringing in more military assets to the region. They want NATO to pick up the spending in that area because what are they doing? They are preparing for World War III, because what is going on around the world is that the economies are completely imploding on themselves. And let's take a look at the current economic collapse news here. Now we see that the European nations are really struggling. They're not doing well at all. Even though the government officials are out there telling us that everything is fine, we're in a recovery, the central bankers are telling us we're in a recovery, we are not in a recovery whatsoever. I mean, Italy right now, they are reporting that their unemployment rate went from 13.6% in the first 3 months of this year, and their youth unemployment reached 46%. And this is happening to each and every one of the countries in the European nations. Now, some countries are a little bit worse or much worse than others, and other countries are doing a little bit better. But eventually, what's going to happen, this is going to completely spread because this debt cannot be sustained, and those countries that are bringing down the rest of the European nations need more and more bailouts. They need more debt, which means more austerity, which means more people without jobs, which means the country cannot be sustained at this time. Now, the EU is warning Greece at this time that they are very concerned because of the resignation of the top tax collector in Greece. Now, we know Greece is having many problems right now. Many people in Greece are finding it very difficult to make ends meet. The unemployment there is very high. The youth unemployment is 60%. And you have to remember, the youth are the foundation of every single country. They graduate high school or college. They move into the working sector. They find these jobs. They bring money in. They start saving for homes to start a family. They go to retail markets and they buy TVs. They buy clothing. And we are not seeing any of this happen because the youth of America just cannot find work at this time. And in every single one of these countries, the youth unemployment is very high. Even in the United States, youth unemployment is very high. And I reported this many times before, but the youth that are coming out of college right now, about 80% of them cannot find work. And if they do find work, it's part-time work. They have troubles paying their student loan. They're still living with their parents. They could care less about health insurance at this time. They're just trying to make ends meet. They're trying to get, on their feet, and they're having a very rough time doing this. Now, here in the United States, what's happening is they are telling us right now that the United States is on the verge of recovering all the jobs that were lost during the recession. Now, don't you feel that everything is better at this point? I mean, it really does feel like we're in this fantastic recovery because they're just shy about 113,000 jobs from their goal back in January of 2008. Now, of course, they don't specify what types of jobs these are. The people who've dropped out of the labor force, they don't mention any of that kind of stuff. They're just telling you that we're reaching that goal with their manipulated numbers. That's it. But when you look around, it doesn't make sense whatsoever. If that is true, that we're only 113,000 jobs away from January 2008 before the recession, why do we see retail imploding on itself? Why is retail closing thousands upon thousands of stores? Why are retail sales down? Why is the housing market completely imploding on itself? Why then are mortgage originations down by 66%? Why did the big financial institutions lay off thousands upon thousands of people in their mortgage division? It makes no sense. Why is the Fed continually stimulating the economy? Why are they buying the toxic real estate from the banks? Why are they buying treasuries using Belgium as a proxy? Why is all this happening if we're only 113,000 jobs away from January of 2008 before the crash? Something does not make sense. Now, it's either the manipulated numbers that they're throwing at us, or the economy is really getting better. Well, I'm going to say it's really the manipulated numbers. That is the problem. It is not fitting the economy right now. Now, they were able to do this during the beginning stages because you couldn't really tell, and now as we went further and further along, it does not fit. What they're telling us does not fit what's actually happening in the economy right today. And what we are seeing in the job market, that initial claims now have risen by 8,000, and we can see that it missed expectations, of course. And right now, Challenger, and this is coming from Challenger, Gray, and Christmas, they're the ones who track layoffs. They are saying that in May, there was a 45% increase in layoffs. Now, we know it didn't snow in May. We know it wasn't the weather because, May is pretty nice. It was sunny. It was getting warmer. So we know that layoffs were really ramping up from January to now, and they're continuing, and we're seeing more and more people getting laid off. And this goes on to say that Challenger, Gray, and Christmas just announced that job cuts soared by 45.5% year over year in May, the biggest annual rise in 9 months. Even more worrisome is the actual number of layoffs. Around 53,000 was the highest since February 2013. So we can see all these layoffs that we talked about from January to now, it's all starting to bombard and come together. And what happens is when we go through this summer and they run out of their severance, they run out of unemployment, when we reach the fall, everything just starts to fall apart. And we see these people still looking for jobs, they can't find them, and everything starts to really fall apart, and the manipulated illusion numbers go one way, the real economy goes the other way, and they don't even meld anymore in the story, and it makes no sense whatsoever what the government is trying to tell us. Now, the BRIC nations and many other nations are realizing that there is a huge, huge problem. The economy of the world, the dollar, is dying, and they realize this, and this is why the BRICS are starting up their own bank. This is why China, Russia, and other nations are making deals to completely bypass the US dollar. This is why China is out there making bilateral agreements, setting up clearinghouses with the UK, making bilateral agreements with Australia, New Zealand, setting up clearinghouses in Kenya. They are doing this on purpose because they're setting this up for when the dollar fails, and they realize this. Now, the BRIC nations, they're hoping to bankroll a changing world order, and we understand the BRIC nations are setting up a bank which will rival the World Bank, and the BRICS say the West has taken advantage of its monopoly in international lending to wield outside influence in the economic and political affairs of developing countries, dictating development models that further entrench these countries' subservience to the West. The roots of the World Bank and IMF still lie in the post-World War II environment, and this needs to change. This is a dying system, and we need to completely reset it, and this is what they're trying to do. But again, the private Western central bankers will not let this happen. They will continue they will continually push their agenda, trying to put and capture every single nation so they can put them on the U.S. dollar, set up a private Western central bank, and they will not stop doing this. Now, we talked about Afghanistan quite often, and we realized that President Obama was out there and he's like, oh yeah, we're withdrawing the troops and we're going to bring this down to hardly any troops. And we know this is a complete lie. We know this is not what's going to happen. Remember, Karzai would not sign the bilateral security deal, and if he did sign it, that would mean the United States would stay in Afghanistan for another 10 years. So at this time, what they're waiting for is the election. When the new president is elected in Afghanistan, they're going to bring up the bilateral security agreement once again to the new president, hoping to force this president into signing it. Now, if they do sign it, the troops will be there for another 10 years. So you can see what they're doing. Of course, there's lip service from Obama and then reality of what is actually going on. Now, North Korea is going to make many different agreements with Russia at this time, and North Korea will grant Russia firms access to its natural resources in exchange for imports and investments. You have to remember, North Korea is still under sanctions from the United States, and they're making deals to completely bypass anything that has to do with the West at this time. And Russia and North Korea, they are looking to make a deal, and they're preparing to launch a bilateral transaction in the Russian ruble this month to boost trade turnover between the two nations to $1 billion. North Korea currently uses euros as the official currency in settling overseas trade deals, and now they're switching out. They don't want anything to do with the West, and this is just another sign that all of these countries are detaching themselves from the euro, from the U.S. dollar, because they realize what's going on here. Now, North Korea is going to be opening up their country to Russia, and they're going to set to make it easier for them to travel into North Korea. So they're going to remove restrictions for Russian investors and let them surf the internet while in the country. They'll be able to use mobile networks, and they will be able to invest in North Korea. And again, Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, Syria, Brazil, Venezuela, Argentina, and many other BRIC nations are all making deals, sticking together because they realize what is going on in the world and they need to protect themselves from what is happening. Now, in Ukraine, things are not getting better there. They're actually getting worse. The anti-terrorism forces have been intensified. The Poroshenko was elected, which he was part of the same puppet regime. There is absolutely no difference there whatsoever. And of course, the banks are running the whole entire country at this time, telling them what to do. And right now, they've been cutting off the water supply to Crimea because they're saying, oh, they haven't made payments on their water delivery, almost like what Russia's doing with their gas. So they're trying all these different methods to say, oh, you owe us money, you're not going to pay? Well, we're cutting off your water supply. And pretty much they have this temporary dam set up, and water is now not flowing into Crimea. And Russia is debating if they should construct a desalination plant in Crimea to solve the problem with water coming in there. Ukraine used to supply up to about 85% of Crimea's fresh water through the North Crimean Channel that runs from the Northern River. Earlier in April, in response to Crimea's reunification with Russia, the Ukrainian government decided to halt all freshwater supplies to the peninsula, arguing the Republic owes the country for earlier supplies. So you can see they're doing a tit for tat, and they're making the people suffer. They're not giving them water, and I think it would be the best thing that they set up this this desalination plant to provide them with fresh water at this time, and this way they don't have to involve themselves with Ukraine. Now, Russia and China, they're inching toward another gas contract. Russia and China could soon sign another major contract. The contract on the western route, also called the Altai natural gas pipeline, might be less capital intensive than that of the eastern one, but it's no doubt going to cost about $10 billion to do this. So we can see they're going to have a gas line coming out of the west and in the east, and they're looking to sign another one at this time. Now, China is very pissed off about the United States going on about them doing cyber attacks and cyber espionaging the United States. And of course we know they named the 5 people in China, which is really impossible to say that these are the exact people that did it. I can't even believe they have the ability to track down where these attacks come, because the advanced actors who do this, they don't do it out of their own country. They bounce it off many different servers. And like I said before, if they can actually really track down all of this information, it would be so easy then to block spam and you would no longer receive it. But guess what? They don't know where all this is coming from, because they bounce it from server to server from server, and every time they think they know, they just switch it up, and they can never do this. But right now, China is lashing out at Google, Apple, and U.S. technology companies on Wednesday, calling on Beijing to punish these pawns of the U.S. government for stealing their secrets. Because you have to remember, all these companies have backdoors for the NSA. China state media has announced that U.S. companies such as Yahoo, Cisco Systems, Microsoft Corp, and Facebook threaten the cybersecurity of China. So now China, of course, is fighting back. They're not taking Windows. They're not using Cisco products. They want IBM servers out, and they're continually doing this. And of course, the United States is looking at it, and the central bankers saying, "Oh, we should start placing sanctions on these people." And this is what always happens. And if you really look around with these sanctions that they place on all these countries, I mean, North Korea had sanctions, Iran had sanctions, Syria has sanctions, Cuba has sanctions since 1959. Really, what we're looking at, sanctions really don't work. They do absolutely nothing. They always find a way around it. So even though they place these sanctions on these countries, it doesn't really seem to work, because when you have sanctions for 30 or 40 years, it pretty much doesn't work at this point. So what are they going to do? Well, the G7 leaders were missing because they kicked Russia out, and it used to be called the G8, now it's the G7, and they're looking to place more sanctions on Russia. And Obama is out there, and he's saying that these new sanctions are going to hit the entire sectors of the Russian economy. Well, no, they're not, because that would have a horrific effect on the European nations and the United States, and this would not be good. Some of the European countries, like Germany, are saying, I don't know if this is such a great idea, but this is lip service right now, and we'll just go along with the lip service that you're giving and threatening everyone with. So, of course, Russia hears this, and they're saying, you know what, let's protect ourselves. We're going to yank out our money from the Western banks. And U.S. banks enjoyed more or less steadily climbing, or rather soaring, deposits by Russian institutions and individuals, and they were up around $21.6 billion worth of deposits. But right now, what we're seeing is that actually they were over 21.6 billion. They plunged to 21.6 billion to 8.4 billion now, and they're continually taking their money out of these banks. So you see what they're doing. They're protecting themselves. They want to make sure that they have all their money out before the United States central bankers, the European nations, place any type of sanctions on any other individuals, or if they wanted to be stupid enough, they place sanctions on the entire sector of Russia, or many sectors of Russia, and they just want to have their money out, bring it all back to Russia or other venues. And again, if they do these sanctions, they will have a boomerang effect on the economies of Europe and the United States, because we are hanging on by a thread at this time. Now, Russia is out there, and they are urging the U.S. to stop involvement in Ukraine. They understand that there are paid mercenaries in there, and Russia is calling on the United States to take steps to curb involvement of foreign mercenaries in the ongoing military operation in Ukraine. We would like the U.S. administration to take efficient measures to curb participation of mercenaries from abroad in Kiev's punitive operation against the protesters, against the people fighting for their rights in southeastern regions of Ukraine. We cannot ignore continuing reports, including in Western media outlets, that groups of private companies specializing in providing security and military operations are acting in Ukraine. The notorious Greystone or Academy is only the best known logo of such structures. Judging by information coming from various sources, we are dealing not only with this structure, which has stained itself by mercenary activities in numerous conflicts, but also some other, including some from Eastern Europe, from Syria, and from Poland. And right now, they have information of who's in there. We really understand that there are paid mercenaries in Ukraine, pretty much the same ones that were in Syria. They are using them to take out and push the agenda forward with these terrorists forces, and they don't care who they kill. They don't care about these people. They don't care about the children or the women. They could care less, and this is why the United States central bankers bring in the paid mercenaries, because they realize they have nothing to lose here and everything to gain. They're getting paid, they're doing what they need to do, and they will carry out these acts of terror with absolutely no problem whatsoever. Now, Ukraine is getting all crazy now, and they have propaganda flying everywhere, just like they always do. Just like, Russia's building up troops, 100,000 forces in Crimea. They have 7 million people on the border of Ukraine and Russia, and right now they are closing 8 border crossings with Russia at this time. Because what do they see? They see Russia making moves to come into the country. They see armored vehicles all over the place. They're coming in, and they're very worried. Well, the reason why I say they're closing these border crossings, it could be that the anti-terrorism forces are looking to make a really huge push, and they don't want anything or anybody from Russia coming in whatsoever. And I believe this is why they're doing this at this time. They're closing everything down so they can use the final stage to get all these people in the southeastern region and really hit them hard. And I think this is what's going to be going on. I think this is why you have the propaganda coming out of Ukraine saying that Russia's coming in, they're ready to invade. And I don't think this is Putin's style. This is not how he acts from the past. I think they're sitting back watching all of this, and they're trying not to get involved at this time. And really, if he really wanted to get involved, he would have done it already. And believe me, the closing the border crossings would not stop them from coming into the country at this time. Now, we understand that NATO is continually building up the forces, and they are definitely encircling Russia at this time. Britain is offering 1,000 troops and tanks at this time to keep Russia contained. A British armored battle group could join NATO maneuvers in Poland later this year as the alliance reinforces exercises in response to the Ukraine crisis. Britain has offered NATO an armored battle group, including up to 25 tanks, to join exercises in Poland as a show of force against Putin. The deployment would see as many as 1,000 British soldiers join NATO forces for war games across the border from Ukraine. And we can see this is what they are doing. And now Hagel is back out there saying the United States will strengthen its presence in the Black Sea region using part of the $1 billion fund promised to NATO allies on Russia's borders, and will continue to send warships to the area. And this is coming from Chuck Hagel. We will sustain that tempo going forward, Hagel told reporters, referring to the rotating presence of U.S. ships in the Black Sea. They will not end this. They are continually beefing up the entire armed forces surrounding Russia at this time. And we can see this taking place. They're bringing in sophisticated missiles, building up this missile shield. And of course, in their minds, they think they're protected from a nuclear strike because these missile shields are going to block all the ballistic missiles headed towards the United States. They have the same thing out in the Pacific Asian region. This is completely crazy. There's absolutely no way that this missile shield is going to block all these ballistic missiles coming over to the United States if the United States decides to make a first strike nuclear attack against Russia. And this is part of their plan. And you have to remember, the Chinese and Russia, they have developed hypersonic missiles. The United States does not have this technology at this time. This is a huge, huge problem. These missiles will never be able to intercept the missiles coming from Russia and China. And this is going to pose a problem. They're living in a dream world. And again, they're going to be safe underground in their bunkers, and who's going to pay the price? The people of the world. And of course, what people are saying that this might be part of their plan to reduce the population of the world. And again, we have to remember their entire plan is to keep the reserve currency. It's all about that, and they will not stop, and they will not let any other country take on the responsibility of becoming the reserve currency. They will not let this happen. It has to be them. Now, we understand the talks are continuing with Iran, the P5+1 talks, and they're supposed to be, the interim deal is up on July 20th. And what is happening right now, the talks aren't really going as well as they wanted. And of course, there is this secret deal that nobody can see. It's kept in a place somewhere in the U.S. government where only a certain number of personnel do have permission to go in. You have to leave your phone outside. You have to sign in. You can't touch it. You can't take it out of the room. You can't make photocopies. And that document is sitting there. And this was done secretly without anyone knowing what it really says. And I believe this had to do with the central banks trying to get into the country to take over the bank inside Iran and actually place the oil on the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency. And this was part of the interim deal, and this is why they have it, and this is why nobody can see it at this time. Again, these nuclear talks are absolutely ridiculous. It is a smokescreen at this time, and the interim deal does run out July 20th. And right now, what they're saying is that the latest round of talks in mid-May ended without tangible results. Experts claim that Iran and 6 world powers are unlikely to meet their July 20th deadline to sign a long-term agreement. And right now the White House is saying they have no plans in extending it. This is why they've been keeping up the propaganda about attacking Iran. Israel is setting aside a huge amount of money and building up their armed forces because they're going to be ready to attack Iran. The United States is continually keeping up the propaganda that Iran is cyber attacking. They've reached the stage where they're almost equal to China and Russia. And we can see that they're continually using the propaganda that Iran is very, very close to a nuclear weapon. And we have to remember they've been saying this for the last 30 years, that they're always 3 to 5 months away, and it's been over 30 years there now, and we've never seen any type of nuclear weapon. Actually, the nuclear authority went into Iran to inspect, and they said there are no nuclear weapons. Everything looks great. They're abiding by the agreements. They're doing everything they're supposed to be doing. And the United States right now, and the central bankers, if they cannot get into their banking system, they will switch it up and they will use other tactics to get into there. Now, what's very funny, and that in Syria, the head of Al-Qaeda, the paid mercenaries, I guess since they've been losing the battles, the head guy decided, you know what, I'm going to get out of here. And the Syrian government caught this guy. He was dressed in Muslim drag, so they couldn't recognize him, and he was trying to get out of the country. And this just goes to show you that the paid mercenaries are completely losing at this time. Assad is pushing them out of the country. He's won the election already. And of course, John Kerry is out there, and he's saying that these elections are completely meaningless. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has denounced Syria's presidential elections, calling it a meaningless exercise. The vote was meaningless because you can't have an election where millions of your people don't even have the ability to vote. You mean like in Ukraine? Like Afghanistan? Listen to what he's saying. How many millions of people didn't vote in Ukraine, in the southeastern section, because they said they weren't going to vote? But they still had the elections. They still applauded the new puppet regime. Think about what's going on here. So if the United States controls the puppet regime, the elections are okay. If the United States does not control the government, the elections are no good. And of course, they're saying this because they are building their case right now. They're trying anything and any way they can to get into Syria. They're using the chemical weapon mini false flag type of attempt here with the chlorine gas showing that Assad still has chemical weapons. They will not let the remaining 7 to 8% of the chemical weapons out of the country, because if they do, Assad has fulfilled the treaty which was signed by Russia, United States, and Syria, so they need to keep a little bit in the country, and they're making the case that he's hiding these chemical weapons, and he needs to prove that he's not hiding it, which is impossible to do. So what's happening right now is they're trying to make this case where they can say this treaty is null and void and we need to go into Syria. But I don't think this is going to work out for them. And what's going to happen is they're going to have to resort to some type of an event, because they can see what's happening is that nothing they're doing is actually working. Actually, it's backfiring on them. Every time they come up with another plan, it just doesn't work. I mean, look at the false flag event with Turkey when they tried to sneak Turkish military officers into Syria with a missile launcher, and they wanted them to fire back into Turkey to say, hey, Syria's just fired at us, we're at war, and we can bring in the NATO troops. Well, we see that's not happening whatsoever. That completely fell apart. Now we have with the multiple chlorine chemical attacks, and now they're trying to prove that he's hiding chemical weapons. This is just not going to work. And what we're going to see here, and we've had many, many government officials out there telling us this, that the backlash from all these people going into Syria, they are becoming radicalized, they're on the CIA payroll, and they will commit terror on the United States. That's pretty much what they're saying. And right now there's a report out there saying that 12,000 potential terrorists from 81 nations got combat training in Syria. So, is anyone there Syrian? Pretty much no. It looks like it's all paid mercenaries from around the world who wanted to make money. The West faces an al-Qaeda blowback based on foreign fighters in Syria. Author Richard Barrett asserted that more than 12,000 foreign fighters from 81 countries have fought in Syria since 2011. 3,000 of these fighters were from the West, and this is what they're saying right now. They've been paying them, the CIA has been training them, and these are the secret bases in Jordan. We still have the military exercises going on in Jordan. Those go until June 8th, and they're saying that all these people that we trained, they are now terrorists, and when they don't win this war in Syria, they probably, most likely, will come back to Europe, UK, United States, and we could have a major problem. The FBI was already out there telling us that some of them already arrived in the United States. They've lost track of them, and they know how to make bombs. This is why Holder has created the homegrown terrorist force, searching and looking for domestic terrorists. And of course, that applies to those Americans that are coming back into the country, and the Americans here that pretty much criticize the government and are on the special interest lists of the government, of those who would be a threat to the government powers. So we can see they are building this propaganda up continually, slowly, for this next event, and this is exactly what they're doing. And we can see all of this starting to take shape now, and pretty much we can say we're already in some type of war with Russia, with China, with Syria, with many of the BRIC nations, with China at this time, because if you really look around, we have forces all over the world. When I say we, it's United States central bankers, have forces all around the world battling all these different places, and all we need is one spark to really kick off the big war, where everyone will go, oh my God, yes, we are at war. But this is how it starts. We're following it very slowly. We can see what's happening, and the reason why we follow this is to make sure that everyone gets gets prepared for what is coming. Make sure you protect your wealth. Make sure you protect your family. Make sure you protect your family with food and water and medicine and supplies. Because what we know from the past and everything these people have done, and that's United States central bankers, we see that when they are desperate, they resort to desperate measures, and those desperate measures are creating false flag events to try to convince people that things are happening here that aren't really happening, but they need to convince you that it's coming from someplace else. And we can see this is what they'll end up doing. This is why they've been prepping everyone with this 2-week cyber attack that could hit the financial institutions, millions of computers, and shut down the financial industry and bring the economy to its knees. This is why they're telling you that the last couple of weeks of June they have some type of DHS or some type of training going on where they're hiring actors at this time because they're running a drill in Atlanta, Georgia, and this is, I think, the last 2 weeks of June. So this is all starting to come together right now, and we're seeing that, yes, there is an event that's going to occur, and we just need to be ready for it. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.